Hello, my name is Leigh Graves Wolf, and I sincerely appreciate this opportunity to be with you virtually. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I'm very thankful for the chance to talk at you for a few minutes. Unfortunately, it's not with an interaction with you, but I am going to be online and on Twitter during the whole length of the conference, so I would absolutely love to interact with you there. My username is GravesLE, and I'll be following the Jaltcall hashtag throughout the whole conference as well. What I'd like to do is talk about design thinking for a little bit about how I use it in my own practice, a little bit about the theory, and then to give you some ideas on how you can use it in your own work. So we're going to start out by talking about design thinking, but you may be wondering, who am I? This is me, and I am standing in the Hub for Innovation in Learning and Technology. I'm currently Assistant Director of the Hub, and I'm also an academic specialist in the College of Education. Prior to this appointment, which started about a year ago, I was the co-director of the Master of Arts in Educational Technology program for about 11 years. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about educational technology, educational psychology, and how those things interact in educational contexts. Design thinking is a mindset. Eleanor Horowitz's definition is one of my favorites. She says that design thinking is about having an intentional process in order to get new, relevant solutions that create positive impact. It's human-centered, it's collaborative, it's optimistic, and it's experimental. And I really appreciate her speaking to the process piece of design thinking. We hear this term quite a bit in popular press. And we're also seeing in the literature, this is a screen grab from our MSU libraries, an increase in articles and studies around design thinking. I love on the bottom left here, our library has a new feature which shows the frequency of publications, and you can see over the past handful of years definitely an increase in interest in design thinking. We can trace design thinking's roots back to Stanford and the D School, and they created this 5-piece model for design thinking, which has empathy at the core, defining the problem, ideating on a problem, prototyping, and testing. And a lot of this work centered around the creation of artifacts, around technologies, around products. But Stanford isn't the only person or group that's talked about design thinking from a research perspective. There's the British Design Council Double Diamond, which you'll see some traces of in the D School, this area or this time of discovery, definition, developing, delivering, and then going through and defining that process over again. IBM centers their company around what they call the loop, and it is an iterative process of observing, reflecting, making, and continually doing that through infinity in the design process. There's also a wonderful organization called Design Thinking for Libraries, and they've taken some of the Stanford model along with a company called IDEO, and they've created a whole toolkit for libraries and librarians centered around design thinking. And I'll be sure to get the link to these slides to you as well. Every resource that I'm going through on the slide deck here is hyperlinked to the primary source resource, so you'll have lots of things to take away after you're done listening to the presentation. If you've ever engaged in a design thinking activity, you'll know that at sometimes it can feel slightly uncomfortable. It is meant to be an atypical process, something to jolt us out of our traditional sort of linear modes that we can get into in terms of thinking. And the guys that started at the D School wrote a book called Design Thinking, Understand, Improve, Apply. And they outlined 4 rules of design thinking. One is the human rule, that all activity is ultimately social in nature. The ambiguity rule, design thinkers must preserve ambiguity. The redesign rule, all design is redesign. And the tangibility rule, making ideas tangible always facilitates communication. I can't stress enough how important these 4 rules are. If you're someone that's facilitated a design thinking process, you will know immediately this feeling of discomfort that an audience can experience by not having things in a step-by-step order or very ambiguous directions. And a lot of time, design thinking activities seem like they're a bit disconnected from the ultimate or end goal, which is even more difficult sometimes when you're engaging with an audience. But what we have to remember is that we are all always dealing with ambiguity and engaging in critical thinking. It just is a normal part of our process in a day-to-day life in terms of maybe having to take an alternate route to work and figuring out how to get around an obstacle. Those things are things that over time we've learned to do with ease. But when we engage in a design thinking activity, we're taken back to a time of discomfort when we don't know exactly what happens next. And it's this disconnect and these stretching our brain into new categories that help us come up with new solutions and ideas for moving forward. But it's a highly challenging activity to construct and to engage in. Whenever I'm asked to speak about design thinking, I always mention this article from Helen Walters. And the title, as you can see, is Design Thinking Won't Save You. A lot of people think that they can hire a consultant or they can run a design thinking activity and all of the problems will be solved. Well, that's certainly not the case. Design thinking definitely isn't magic. It's not a quick fix to what we like to call wicked problems, and it certainly doesn't guarantee success. It is something that can help, but it doesn't exist in its own bubble, especially if we're talking about educational contexts. One of the theories that I also like to use in my own practice as I'm designing solutions to, again, that term wicked problems. Wicked problems are problems that don't necessarily have an answer. They may have best or better solutions. And TPAC, technological pedagogical content knowledge, is another framework that can be used when we're tackling these wicked problems in our classroom situations. And the thing that I always like to share when sharing the TPAC model is to point out the dotted line around TPAC, which is the context. That is a critically important piece of the theory that often gets forgotten. We all work in systems, and if we're not in tune and aware of the political implications of those systems, the environmental situations, we could have the most beautifully constructed intervention, technology, or class, but if we're not aware of that context, it's destined to fail. So, how do I use design thinking in some of my own day-to-day work? Some of you may recognize this screenshot. It's a screenshot from the New Media Consortium's Horizon report. And you'll see at the top some of the long-term trends driving EdTech in higher education are advancing cultures of innovation and rethinking how institutions work. And this is the main work that I do in the MSU Hub. The mission and vision of the Hub is to reinvent Michigan State as a learning institution. And I always take a deep breath when I say that out loud. It's quite a large task for us to take on as an organization especially in a Tier 1 research university that has a high focus on research and not as much currently on teaching. There's a huge culture of teaching at MSU, don't get me wrong, but we are tasked as an organization to bring teaching to the forefront as much as research and to reinvent the way students learn at Michigan State. We just started as an organization in January of 2016, so we're just over a year old, and this is a screenshot here of some of our earlier drafts of our mission and vision statements that we were creating. A lot of our work is deeply rooted in design thinking, and you can see here we're hopefully modeling that by showing the open processes of revising, revision, redesign all of the time. As it sits right now, our vision is to help advance Michigan State University by realizing a more active, engaged, successful, and valuable student experience. We facilitate the passion and inventiveness of students, faculty, staff, and stakeholders inside and outside of MSU to create, identify, and accelerate new ways to collaborate, learn, research, and deliver instruction. Now, the title of the talk is From Practice to Theory and Theory to Practice, and those are all very, very lofty, large goals, but how do we actually take these principles of design thinking to do the work? One of the first jobs of the hub is to create the hub. And early in our organization, we together went through a series of design challenges to help get ourselves in the mode of not necessarily failure, but definitely failure, but of redesign, rethinking, and working at a rapid pace. A lot of times, for those of you that work in educational contexts who may have been, say, on a curriculum redesign committee, the meetings can go on for a long time, and it may take a few years for a curriculum to actually get through its reinvention and redesign. We are trying to push against some of those institutional norms and to adopt some practices of design thinking to more rapidly iterate and redefine the work that we do. One of the workshops we did early on was to imagine what a project would look like working across the institution. The hub also is trying to work in all of the silos at Michigan State University and really capitalize on all of the expertise we have on our amazing 50,000 student campus. So what you see on the top is a very messy picture of a group trying to work through what a project would look like from beginning to end. But at the bottom, you see a really cool abstraction that was done by the architects that we were working with in the creation of our space. And they helped us see some patterns in the project work that we were doing. Here's another example here of a project that's sort of timelined from left to right here to the end and the evaluation process. And again, you see at the bottom that abstraction to help us think. And these were some early ways that we were thinking about how our unit would work on campus, and we still refer to these a year later to see how our processes that have emerged are mapping back to what we had imagined and how they could move forward. We also use something called Agile and Scrum processes. These are taken from the software world, and they are very highly adapted versions. So if anyone is familiar with that, these boards that we're using may not look completely familiar, but we really work hard on making our work transparent and open. So every project that we work on in the hub has a physical board in our workspace, which is a co-working space. None of us have desks. We all share workstations and hot desks, very much like a collaborative co-working space. And every Monday we have a report out where we share the work that we've done. What's left to do, what's in progress, what's complete, and what is blocked. It really has helped us collectively as a team. There's about 35 or so of us across campus that work at the hub. Only 7 of us technically work from a line item perspective in the hub, but we really work across campus. And Monday at 10 o'clock every Monday morning, we get together and share out the work that we've done. We also, in the background, use Google Docs to share all of our work that we're doing. So you can flexibly move in and out of projects and work. And again, mapping this back to the idea of design thinking, it's this flexible, iterative, tangible way of working together. Finally, we also use internally something called Slack, which is a great communication tool for teams. And we use Slack internally to share work on projects as a communication tool to cut down on email. The channel you're looking at here is our Huzzah channel, which is our team building channel where we share successes that we've had on projects or individual things that the hub has done. It's been a really, really wonderful way, since we're all at times distributed across campus, a really great way for us to have a virtual place to work together. Now, I've talked a lot about our internal use of design thinking. I'm going to shift a little to some external uses that we've used at Michigan State with some of the partners that we've worked at. Our business school on campus had an opportunity to build a new building, and we worked with them early on in that process to think of the building as a technology, which was sort of trying to reshift and think the way that we approach design of educational technology spaces in schools. And we worked with the faculty by gathering student voices in the business school as to what they imagined would be their ideal learning space, and also not just the ideal, but what types of environments they feel comfortable in. Then we had the faculty listen to those student voices, and we ran them through some design exercises so they could start to think of ways that rooms may be configured, or rethinking potentially the idea of so many lecture halls if we are truly working towards a more collaborative, active, problem-based learning space. Another great project we've been working on is with the College of Veterinary Medicine. About a year ago, just about the same time the hub started, the dean of the vet med school charged his faculty with reinventing the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine curriculum. Vets across the United States graduate with the highest debt load of any medical profession. Additionally, the veterinary medicine field has one of the highest rates of suicide. And so the dean charged the faculty with creating a learner-centered curriculum that's attentive to wellness and also the economic burden that the experience can have on students. And we have been working in collaboration with the College of Veterinary Medicine for the past year to reinvent this curriculum. And just this past May, the entire faculty voted and passed a new curriculum that will be competency-based, and it moves a 4-year vet program to a 3-year program. I highly encourage you, when you get a chance, to take a look at this website that I'm sharing here. It is one of the most fantastic examples that I've seen of a very transparent, open, collaborative process that the College of Veterinary Medicine has modeled. All of our working groups and work sprints and collaborations are archived on the websites, and there's reports and videos and calendars. It really was a tremendously well orchestrated way to get everyone on board and to take the opinions of all stakeholders. So students were involved in this process, graduates, employers, really embracing those design thinking patterns of empathy and thinking of not just the product, but also the humans that are involved in that process. This is just a picture of our working group and some of the work that we've done together. Also on campus, we're trying to reinvent a bit of our professional development opportunities. We had quite an extensive faculty development catalog and workshops that would happen 3, 4, 5 times a week, and the number of participants was dwindling. And so we rebooted our idea of professional development this past fall and started small-scale working groups around technologies. This is a picture here of our Qualtrics work group. It was a 4-week work sprint where we asked people to put aside the lunch hour once a week and to come to the hub to collaborate around Qualtrics. We have some people on campus that were absolute experts and early adopters of the technology, and others who didn't know that it was available. And so we got those people together and we had them share very informally what they know and contrast that with people coming with needs for learning and technology. And we were very quickly, in a short amount of time, able to connect people and start to spark some informal collaboration networks on our large campus that we may not have been able to do in a traditional workshop model. So, we're at a point where I want to share some ways that you can learn more about design thinking, and you can actually engage in it as well. I know how hard it is to sit and listen and be passive. One of the things that I strongly encourage is checking out the Stanford 90-minute virtual crash course in design thinking. You only need 2 people to run this. You could also do it with 200 people or 300 people. It is a tremendous piece of professional development and a really, really, really great low threshold way to sort of get your feet wet and engage in a design thinking process so you can start to imagine ways that you can embed this into your own work. Another great resource is IDEO. It's a company out in San Francisco, and they have a huge catalog of free courses and courses that you can enroll and pay for as well. And they, on a monthly basis, have tons of webinars and online mediated courses that can help you get started with design thinking in many different contexts. They also have a whole division specifically targeted towards education. Coursera is another great resource. They've got, I just did a quick search here, 708 different matches for design thinking courses here, and they also have them in several different languages. So that would be another resource that I would definitely recommend in terms of learning more around design thinking. One of my favorite books is this one by Vijay Kumar called 101 Design Methods. It's a book of exercises and resources for design thinking. So once you are comfortable with the theory and the concept, you're able to go to this book and you can really use it in a way that gives you very detailed instructions on how to run different types of activities. I always struggle sometimes when I was starting out with a lot of theory around design thinking, but not much scaffolding around, okay, I get it, but what do I actually do? This book is really helpful for that. I've written a couple blog posts that I'm sharing with you here, and just sort of lessons learned from doing this. And these posts should be really helpful for, again, getting into those detailed pieces of design thinking. One of my criticisms that I have of design thinking, if you've ever been in an activity that may have been facilitated, you'll see, I feel sometimes, that the activity ends when you leave the room and you never see sort of a pickup or a continuation of those ideas. And one of the things that I've been really trying hard to do in our work in the hub and my own work in the design thinking is another level of analysis of the activity itself. And that was especially important in that veterinary medicine project I was telling you about, where we did some design thinking exercises with groups. And I made sure to embed time in my own workflow to follow up on those activities. There's lots of work in design thinking where you're putting things on sticky notes and post-it notes. We're generating a lot of data. what we did as a team was a post-analysis, essentially a qualitative analysis of that data to help get deeper insights into the situation and use those to fuel future pieces of work. So it's another thing I strongly recommend. And finally, just a reminder, as I said earlier in the presentation, that design thinking is just one tool in my toolbox. There are a lot of different methods, theories that guide my work, but it is one that is quite compelling, and there's a lot of resources online and in a community to help implement this. And with that, I know it's very difficult to facilitate questions because you're only talking to a screen, but do want to reiterate that I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have online. Would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Would love to see your resources if you've ever worked with design thinking. And again, I sincerely appreciate this opportunity, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference.